Well, great. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Chet van Duzer. I think it's safe to say that Chet is a regular participant of our events. He gave a presentation at one of the symposiums a few years ago, and he also gave a presentation to a seminar before. And I also would like to thank Anastasia Kaluta for inviting Chet this time. And of course, I would like to thank Chet for accepting this offer. And I will make a brief introduction to Chet's research. Chet van Duzer is a historian of cartography and a board member of the Lazarus project at the University of Rochester. Which brings multispectral imaging, a technology for recovering information from damaged manuscripts to cultural institutions around the world. And his book Frames That Speak, Cartouches on Early Modern Maps, was just published by Brill in open access. And his current project is on self-portraits by cartographers that appears on maps. And today, Chet will be talking on joining the new world to Asia, revisions to an unstudied world map. Thank you, Chet. You're welcome, please.
Thank you very much, Olga, for that generous introduction. Thank you all for having me here today, and thank you, Anastasia, for the invitation. Let's see. It says I can't share my screen.
Sorry, I'll just fix it. Just one moment. One moment, please. Okay.
Larger.
Вот.
Does that look good?
Да. Да.
Very good. Well,
Yes,
thank
we
you.
can see it.
So my subject today is related to the great intellectual problem that Europe encountered with the discovery of the New World. It was very difficult to determine what exactly these newly discovered lands were, what their relationship was to the known lands, which is to say Europe, Africa, and Asia. And in particular, there was an ongoing uncertainty about whether North America was connected to Asia. And so the map that I'm going to discuss today addresses that issue, this uncertainty about whether North America was connected to Asia. So the map I'm going to discuss is in a manuscript in the British Library, Sloane manuscript 117, which is dated to about 1530. It consists of 24 folios, which are a Latin geographical treatise written as a dialogue between a master and a disciple, with two manuscript maps of the hemispheres at the beginning of the treatise. So here is the map that shows the Eastern Hemisphere, and it goes from the prime meridian through the Canary Islands, 0 degrees longitude, to 180 degrees east. And just to orient ourselves a little bit, here's Africa, here's Madagascar, and here's the island of Taprobana, or Sri Lanka, in the Indian Ocean. And then here is the Western Hemisphere on this two-part world map. And it goes from 180 degrees east to 360 degrees east, or 0 degrees, back to the prime meridian. So this shows the other half of the world. And just to point out a couple of spots on the map to orient ourselves, here's Florida, and here is South America. So what is the source of this, this depiction of the world in these two hemispheres? Well, the ultimate source is the map in front of us, Martin Waldseemüller's famous world map of 1507, which is a printed map, but only survives in one exemplar, which is at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. And if we zoom in on the upper part of the map, we see that we have on the left a portrait of Claudius Ptolemy and an inset map of the Eastern Hemisphere, and on the right, a portrait of Amerigo Vespucci and an inset map of the Western Hemisphere. And the idea here is that Ptolemy represents classical knowledge of Europe, Africa, and Asia, and Vespucci represents the new discoveries in the West, even though Vespucci had no connection with the discovery of Eastern Asia. So if we look first at the map, the inset map by Claudius Ptolemy, we see that it covers 180 degrees of longitude from the prime meridian in the west to 180 degrees east, very similar to the manuscript map we're examining. And if we put them side by side, we can see that they're really quite similar. The way that the northern part of the world is handled in terms of the projection is very, very similar. And both maps have a line that explicitly indicates the southern limit of Claudius Ptolemy's knowledge. So right along this line, there's text that says that Ptolemy did not know the lands south of this line. And the fact that both of these maps have this line is a strong indication of a connection between them. There are, however, some differences between the two maps. The shape of Western Africa is different on the two maps. The Sloane map shows part of a southern continent, a hypothetical southern continent, which does not appear on Waldseemüller's map. The shape of India is quite different on the two maps. And the longitude of Taprobana or Sri Lanka is quite different on the two maps. On the Sloane map, it's further to the east. And also, the lands at the very eastern edge of these maps are different. On the Waldseemüller map, which follows Ptolemy, there's a peninsula that comes down quite far to the south in the Indian Ocean, which is not present on the Sloane map. So the maps are very similar, but certainly not identical. We go now to the map of the Western Hemisphere. Here, again, it shows 180 degrees of longitude. And if we put the two maps side by side, again, they're quite similar in terms of their layout, but their geography is quite different, actually. So we can see that the longitude of South America is very different, and the shape of South America is also very different. The longitude of the island of Isabella or Cuba is very different. And in particular, there's this very dramatic and puzzling difference in this part of the map that I've indicated, where in the Sloane map, we have the southern part of North America, and in Waldseemüller's map, we have Japan and the Proto-Pacific Ocean, if you will. So this is a very striking difference between the two maps. Moreover, the Sloane map has some areas that simply do not appear on Waldseemüller's map. So we have the land of cod in North America. Here, again, we have Florida, which doesn't appear on Waldseemüller's map. We have the Canibales in southern North America on the Sloane map. Mexico, Mangi, so part of the Chinese Empire. Cathay, again, part of the Chinese Empire. And the Judei Clausi, or the enclosed Jews, which again does not appear on Waldseemüller's map. So there are some very strong differences between these two maps. And these differences continue in what we might call the South Pacific. Waldseemüller has several islands, and the Sloane map does not have those same islands, and instead has part of a hypothetical southern continent. So one question is, who made these maps? And I will suggest that they were made by Enriquez Glarianes, who was a music theorist, poet, cosmographer, and humanist, who lived from 1488 to 1563. I suggest this because Glarianes was very interested in Waldseemüller's maps and made several copies of them. So here we have Glarianes' copy of Waldseemüller's whole 1507 map, albeit on a different projection. You can see the difference in projection here, but the geographical data is very, very similar. And Glarianes also made maps that are very much like the hemispheric inset maps that appear on Waldseemüller's 1507 map. So here we see the Eastern Hemisphere in a manuscript at the John Carter Brown Library. And we can see that the general idea is quite similar to what we have in the Sloane manuscript. The projection at the extreme north is somewhat different. But this idea of making copies of these hemispheric inset maps from Waldseemüller's 1507 map is very similar. And here is Glarianes' map of the Western Hemisphere, again, based on Waldseemüller's 1507 map, again, from this manuscript in the John Carter Brown Library in Providence, Rhode Island. And again, there's a slight difference in the projection in the north, but the basic idea of reproducing these inset maps from Waldseemüller's 1507 map is very similar. They're very similar with this significant geographical difference between the two with regard to the connection between Asia and the Americas. This is another of Glarianes' hemispheric maps on a different projection in Munich. So we can see that Glarianes is quite busy making these copies of these inset maps on Waldseemüller's 1507 map with slightly different projections, but I don't know of anyone else who is making these copies. So Glarianes seems like a good candidate for the author of these Sloane maps. So one way to try and check whether Glarianes was the author is to consider the handwriting. And when we do that, we find that the handwriting is not particularly similar. For example, here we have the words Oceanus Occidentalis on the left and Oceanus Occidus on the right. And the way the C's are drawn is not similar. The way the A is written is not similar. The way the S is written is not similar. And again, the way that C's and D's are written is not similar. So this would seem to argue against Glarianes' authorship of the Sloane maps. But the handwriting is not consistent even on Glarianes' acknowledged maps. That is, even on the maps that Glarianes we're certain that he authored. So comparing the Munich map and the map in the John Carter Brown Library, in particular the words India Superior on the two maps, the writing is completely different. The I's, the capital I's are different. The A's are very different. The U's are very different. And the R's are very different. So what this indicates is that when Glorianus was making these maps, he was using some sort of assistant to write the place names. So the fact that the handwriting on the Sloane maps does not seem particularly similar to Glorianus's handwriting is not an argument against his authorship of the Sloane maps. Let's take a closer look at the Sloane maps and particularly the changes that were made to the map of the Western Hemisphere. And to do this, I'm going to use a technology called multispectral imaging. And the basic idea of multispectral imaging is that one takes digital photographs of an object at specific frequencies of light, ranging from 365 nanometers to 940 nanometers, which is to say, ranging from ultraviolet through the visible light spectrum and into the infrared. And the basic idea is that each of these digital images will reveal something about the damaged or altered manuscript. And in processing the images, one combines the images in a way that that what is revealed by each image is put together in one image. And it's a very powerful, here's an image of the equipment for doing multispectral imaging. So we have the digital camera, 50 megapixels in this case, the support for the manuscript, the LED lights, which shine only the desired specific frequency on the object, and then plastic diffusers between the LED lights and the object, which ensure that the light arrives on the object evenly diffused. And I want to say thank you to Christina Duffy of the British Library for imaging this manuscript for me. This technology is useful for recovering texts from manuscripts damaged by fading, water, fire, overpainting, palimpsesting, and wrinkling. And in the case of the Sloane manuscript, as we will see, we have some overpainting. And multispectral imaging will help us see what the manuscript looked like originally, what these manuscript maps look like originally. So going back to this comparison between the Western Hemisphere on Waldseemüller's map and the Sloane manuscript, we've seen that there are significant differences between the two. And given that Glorianus was fond of making these copies of Waldseemüller's inset maps, these differences are surprising. But it turns out that originally the two maps were very similar. So if we zoom in on the Sloane map, there are some parts of the map where there are signs that the map was modified. And we'll begin with South America. Here's a multispectral image of the map, and it helps us see that the contours of South America, the shape, the outlines of South America used to be very different. And in fact, the shape of South America used to be very similar to what it is on Waldseemüller's inset map. Here. And if we zoom in on the Caribbean and Atlantic, we can see that there is the multispectral image helps us see the outline of a landmass there, which is to say, the outline of North America and the peninsula of Florida. And also we have here the island of Cuba, of Isabella, which is Cuba, with a configuration very, very similar to what we have on Waldseemüller's map. Zooming out again, if we look at the Pacific, and again switch to a multispectral image and zoom in, we can see that there are signs of the islands which in Waldseemüller's map are in the Indian Ocean, and in the changed geography of this map are in the Pacific. But we can see the remnants of the names and shapes of those islands, which are very similar to the ones on Waldseemüller's map. And looking again at a multispectral image of the map, if we look at this landmass in the upper left of this image, which is this curious combination of North America and Asia, we can see a difference in the writing on the map. The handwriting left or west of this red line is darker than the handwriting to the east or to the right of that line. And what we're seeing here is the original contours of this map and the difference between the original part of the map and what has been added later. So the part to the left of that red line is what was originally on the map, and then to the right of that, to the east of it, is the part that has been added. And again, those contours, the original contours, are very, very similar to those on Waldseemüller's map. So this map has been very heavily modified. Again, we have this darker writing west of this line. And having seen the multispectral image, if we go back to the natural light image here, we can now appreciate that difference even without the multispectral image. So the multispectral image was helpful in appreciating that difference, but now that we've seen the difference, we can appreciate it even without the multispectral image. And zooming in a bit, we can actually see that there's a difference in the pigment used in the writing. So it's black, a black pigment west of the line and a brown pigment east of it. So a strong confirmation that these two parts of the map were made by probably different people and at different times. And another interesting difference between the original part of the map and what has been added is the way that the mountains are drawn. So the mountains east of that red line are drawn in a more sloppy way, and they're sort of wider and larger than the mountains west of that line. So this is another strong indication that these two parts of the map had different authors, and thus that the map was very extensively modified in the course of its history. So where did this revised depiction of the New World as being joined to Asia come from? So it's very interesting that the cartographer, there was this debate about the relationship between North America and Asia, and are they joined or were they not joined? And the person who modified this map was clearly convinced that they were joined. But what was the model that this cartographer was using? I suggest that the model was this map by the French cartographer Laurence Fine, made in 1534. And we can see this exemplar of the map is in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. And if we look at the map, we see that it shows North America as joined to Asia, much as the Sloane map does. So if we zoom in, we can see we have the Bacalearum Regio, the land of cod, which we also saw on the Sloane map. We have Terra Florida, Canibales, which we also saw on the Sloane map, Mexico, also on the Sloane map, Mangi, Katai, and the Judei Clausi. All of these place names we saw on the Sloane map. So there's a strong connection between the revised version of the Sloane map and this map by Laurence Fine. So this combination, connection between North America and Asia, it extends across this quartiform map and is joined to Western Asia. And if we zoom in, we can see that the word Asia, A-S-I-A, extends across this entire landmass, indicating in the clearest possible way that North America is connected to Asia and is part of Asia. We zoom in on the Eastern Pacific on Orange Fine's map. Here we can see the islands, and the islands are Sioli, Timor, Java Minor, so Java Minor, and the Moluccas. And switching to the Sloane map, we have exactly the same islands on the Sloane map: Siolo, Timor, Java Minor, Java Minor, and the Moluccas. So again, very strong confirmation that whoever was modifying this map to join the New World to Asia, to join North America to Asia, was inspired by Orange Fine's map. We look at the two hemispheres together, we can see that in the southern Indian Ocean / Pacific, there is a southern continent, a hypothetical southern continent. And there are some words written in that southern continent, and translating from the Latin, it says, part of the southern land recently discovered, but not yet fully explored. And a very similar phrase occurs in the southern continent on Orange Fine's map. We zoom in, we can see that it says Terra Australis nuper inventa sed non dum plene examinata, southern land recently discovered but not yet fully explored. So almost exactly the same wording that is on the Sloane map. So the Sloane map was revised to indicate that North America and Asia were joined. And I want to look at some other examples of cartographers who address this question about the connection between Asia and the New World. So Martin Waldseemüller, on his 1507 map, famously describes and depicts the New World as islands. He explicitly shows that there's an ocean to the west of the Americas, and says so in the pamphlet that he published to accompany the map. But he changed his mind when he made his Carta Marina in 1516. He had decided that actually the New World is connected to Asia. So if we zoom in on the New World in Waldseemüller's Carta Marina, he does not show a western coast of South America. So he doesn't commit to the presence of an ocean west of South America. And more importantly, in part of North America, he says that this landmass is the land of Cuba, part of Asia. So he is explicitly changing his mind. He has changed his mind about whether the New World, the Americas, are connected to Asia. And he here clearly says that they are. And this is a great indication of this continuing uncertainty about the nature of the new discoveries in the West and whether or not they were connected to Asia. It was possible to change one's mind. Here we have Giacomo Gastaldi's Universale of 1546, world map. And just to orient ourselves, here's Africa, here's South America. Here is Western Asia. And here we have North America. And we can see that North America continues off the western edge of the map and joins Asia on the eastern edge of the map. So Gastaldi is clearly depicting North America as connected to Asia. But as we'll see, he changed his mind. So this is Gastaldi's world map made a few years later in about 1561. And again, just to orient ourselves, here's Africa, South America, and North America. And if we zoom in on the map, we can see that now Gastaldi depicts a strait separating Asia and North America. So Waldseemüller changed his mind from believing that North America and Asia were separate to believing they were joined. Gastaldi changed his mind in the other direction. He initially believed they were joined, then he decided they were separate. So zooming in on Gastaldi's map, here we have the two coasts of Eastern Asia and Western North America. And in between them, he places the Strait of Anian, which at this point was purely hypothetical. Here we have Caspar Vopel's world map of 1558. It was first printed in 1545. Again, just to orient ourselves, here's Africa, South America, and North America. And if we zoom in on North America, I've indicated the edges of the continent, the contours of the continent. And we have Florida as a peninsula. And as part of the same landmass, we have Asia Magna, India Orientalis, Asia Orientalis. So going back, we can see that Asia and North America are clearly joined for Caspar Vopel. But another world map from the same period, 1550, this is Pierre Desaillier's spectacular manuscript world map from 1550. Pierre Desailliers was on the other side of this question. He believed that Asia and North America were not connected. Again, just to orient ourselves, here's Africa, North America, and Asia. And we can see that East Asia has a defined coastline and is not joined to North America. And in fact, Pierre Desailliers addresses this question on his map in the text that I've highlighted. He says, some cosmographers have conjoined Asia with Florida, meaning North America, the continent of New Spain and America, and say that this is part of Asia. But their opinion is not to be followed, since it does not appear to be true, neither according to experience nor according to reason. So, a few conclusions. Well, we've seen that this question of whether North America and Asia were connected continued throughout the 16th century, and some cartographers believed that they were connected, other cartographers believed that they were not. And so this radical revision of the Sloane manuscript map is reasonable in that context. Someone saw Orange Fien's map and revised this copy of Waldseemüller's map to try to make it more accurate, to try to make that map conform to his understanding of the world's geography. So I think it's reasonable to conclude that these maps in the Sloane manuscript were made by Enricus Glorianus based on Waldseemüller's 1507 map. I don't know of anyone else who was making manuscript copies of these inset maps on Waldseemüller's 1507 map. And at some point after 1534, the map of the New World, the map of the Western Hemisphere, which originally looked like this, was radically revised so that North America was joined to Asia and South America was displaced to the west. to better join with North America, I suppose we might say. So again, a radical revision of this map, which we've been able to appreciate thanks to the multispectral imaging. So this map in its revision reflects this continuing debate about the relationship between North America and Asia. Why and on whose behalf was this change undertaken? Why would one revise this manuscript map instead of just making a new one? Who was it who made these revisions? I'm afraid I haven't been able to find any clues about who would have made the changes, unfortunately, but we do know that the changes were based on Orange Fien's world map of 1534. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chet, for an amazing talk. And it's incredible how much information can offer such a close examination of old maps, and not only about the physical space itself or or the development of ideas about the world, but also about such no obvious things as the relationship between maps and power, and even the character of the cartographers themselves. I know you made such suggestions for some of them. And now the modern technologies, such as multispectral analysis, help to read previously poorly studied maps, revealing previously unreadable areas. And I would like to ask if it is possible to use multispectral analysis when studying materials other than paper, for example, when studying drawings on wood, on clay, or on leather, for example.
Thank you, Olga. It is possible for parchment, to be sure. I think it would work on leather. Wood would be challenging. It depends in part on the pigments that were used. But for example, multispectral imaging is very useful in manuscripts that are palimpsests, where the parchment had a text on it, and someone decided that that text was no longer valuable or useful, and the text was scraped off the parchment, and the parchment was reused. Another text was written on it. Using multispectral imaging, it's possible to recover the original text that was scraped off, the so-called undertext. And so that's a case involving leather. Parchment is basically leather. I think with wood and other media, it would depend on the specific case.
I see. Let's move on to questions. Dear colleagues, turn on your sound and ask questions, please. You also have an opportunity to post your questions in our chat, and I will read it, please.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, Chet, it's a really fascinating talk. Congratulations. Well, I have one question in respect of the first part of your talk. In this dialogue between disciple and teacher, I wonder if one of them makes suggestions about origin of American Indians.
I don't think so. No, as far as I recall, no. But that certainly is a very interesting question, and one that's very closely related to the geographical changes on this map. So there was the intellectual question of what exactly are these newly discovered lands? How are they related to or connected with the known parts of the world? And then subsequently, where did the people there come from? And of course, if the Americas are joined to Asia, the answer to that question was relatively simple. But if it was not, it was much more complicated. And that was another important part of the intellectual problem generated by the discovery of the New World. Not only what is its geographical relation to the known parts of the world, but what's the relationship between the peoples and plants and animals of the New World? What's their relationship between them and the known peoples, animals, and plants of Europe, Asia, and Africa? Yeah, so that's an important part of the question, really.
Well, in the case of Sloane map, we see cannibals in Mexico. Where they came from, I wonder.
Well, all I can say is that they were copied in that position, exactly that position from Orange Fine's map of 1534. But where Orange Fine got the idea that these cannibals were in Mexico, I'm not sure. So it was believed that there were cannibals in the New World, but the location assigned to them moves around a fair bit.
Well, in fact, ritual cannibalism was one of the most disgusting practices for Spaniards in Mexico.
That's right. That's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Some other questions, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the interesting talk. And so my question also is connected to the problem that Anastasia raised about the origins of American Indians. So we know that first scholar who suggested that American Indians were descendants of the migrants from South, well, from Asia, yes, from Eastern Asia, probably was Jose de Acosta in his famous Moral and Natural History of the Indies. So he was criticizing the idea that Indians had a knowledge of navigation and wrote that they had only very small boats and actually couldn't cross the large bodies of water. But he never refers to any cartographic materials and never describes whether America and Asia are connected or not, saying that it's not known. So probably this knowledge, which was expressed in cartographic way, was not so well accepted by the historians. Well, Acosta was not only historian, he was also geographer and naturalist and so on and so on. And this is 1950, if I'm, no, sorry, 1590, if I'm not wrong. Anastasia probably can correct me. So what do you think, how widespread was this knowledge among the historians and geographers who were interested in the history and geography of the Americas?
How widespread was consideration of this question?
Yes.
There is a world map by Jodocus Hondius. If I'm remembering correctly, it is from 1603, so not long after Acosta, where there's an inset map. So it's a large wall map, and there's an inset map in the midst of images of Noah and his sons. And on that inset map, he discusses the origins of the peoples of North America. So it's a very interesting cartographic perspective on precisely that question. And I would be delighted to send you details about that map if it would be of interest to you.
Oh, that would be great. Yes.
Sure. It'd be a pleasure.
Yeah,
it's a very, for me, it's a fascinating question where, this tracing the history of ideas about the origins of the peoples of the Americas is very, very interesting.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions, please? Well, let me ask another question. I'd like to know how widespread was this practice of palimpsest in cartography at that time. How often were the cases of corrections on maps when new information about the outline of the continents appears?
It's a good question. It's a very interesting subject. So I have found a number of cases of revisions to the shape of Africa on maps. So, for example, the manuscript of Ptolemy's geography in the John Carter Brown Library in Rhode Island is well known for being the only manuscript of Ptolemy's geography that depicts Africa as being circumnavigable. All the other manuscripts of Ptolemy's geography, the land of Africa goes all the way to the southern edge of the map, and it's not shown as being circumnavigable. But that one case where Africa is depicted as being circumnavigable was the result of a revision to the map. If we look closely at the map, the land used to extend all the way to the southern edge of the map, but then it was painted over, and we don't know when or by whom, to make Africa circumnavigable. And one interesting question regarding these revisions to maps is why not just make a new map? In many cases, it seems that would be easier, but there are other cases, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I found more cases of revisions to maps of Africa than I have revisions to maps of the Americas, let's say. But whether it's really a common practice, I would say it's probably not really a common practice.
Okay, thank you. So, anyone have another question? Well, let me ask. Is it known on what kind of information was Columbus' confidence in discovering Asia based? And why was he so sure of this connection? Or could it be said that he rather wanted to believe it?
Well, of course, Columbus was not expecting to encounter the New World. He thought that he would sail across the Atlantic and go directly to Asia. As far as the source of his confidence in his plan, I've suggested in previous writings that he was influenced by a world map by Enricus Martellus. So Columbus was hoping to encounter Japan, and Columbus's son, in his biography of his father, says, "My father would certainly have discovered Japan and sailed to Japan had he not believed that the main axis of the island runs north and south." And really the only map or text earlier than Columbus that orients Japan that way are the maps of Enricus Martellus. So it seems very, very likely that Martellus's cartography influenced Columbus. Martellus's world map doesn't show much of the Atlantic. It shows all of East Asia and Japan, and it shows Western Europe out into the Atlantic, but it doesn't show I think it's 60 degrees, which is precisely the part that Columbus would have to cross. But Martellus's map does seem to suggest that this voyage is possible, and that if one sails out into the Atlantic, one would inevitably reach Asia. So So Martellus's cartography was at least one influence on Columbus in convincing Columbus that his project was possible. There's a chapter, or I think two chapters, in Columbus's son's biography of his father, where he talks about the evidence that Columbus had considered in thinking that his project was possible. And it's those two chapters, or one chapter or two chapters, I don't remember, are definitely worth reading on this question, because Columbus had considered quite a variety of evidence that would suggest to him that his project was possible.
Thank you for the answer. Chet, thank you very much for coming and for sharing with us your research, and we will keep recording, and it can be viewed on the Yuri Knorozov Mesoamerican Center YouTube channel. And thanks to everyone who was able to join us today, and I hope to see you again.
Me too. Again, thank you very much for the invitation.
Bye. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
За вашим вопросом стояла стопроцентная уверенность, что в такой замечательной стране каннибалы возникнуть не могут. Они могут только прийти откуда-нибудь